and I can't really see what's looking at the screen. So if I look a bit blurry,
That's all right. As long as we can hear you, we're all good.
yeah, okay, I can hear you. So yeah,
Perfect. Now, Amanda, when you were sitting in school, 15-year-old Amanda, I don't imagine you were envisaging that you were going to be involved with sleep. Can you tell us what was 15-year-old Amanda thinking she was going to do when she grew up?
I wasn't thinking about growing up. That's definitely the case. I at 15, yeah, I was still very much a child. I was still enjoying my childhood and definitely not thinking about my future. In terms of a career, I guess I come from a line of medical professionals. My father's an orthopedic surgeon. My mum was a nurse. My dad's mum was a nurse. My mum's mum was a nurse. So it would seem obvious that that's where I would go. But that was the last thing on my mind was nursing. And I think for me, when I finally got to that career advisory pathway in year 11 and 12, it was marine biology. That sounded like a real adventure, and that's what I wanted to do. But I was a bit of a naughty girl at school, and I didn't actually get the grades I needed to go to James Cook University in Queensland. So I ended up going to biology and doing biology at Curtin University, which turned out to be. I went to most of the geology lectures because the geologists were really cute. But yeah, nursing was the last thing on my mind, and that's actually what I graduated with. So I got kicked out of biology, terminated. Proud, no, and I went traveling around Australia in a combi van with my then boyfriend, and yeah, I met this lady on Stradbroke Island who just opened my eyes up to really where my passions lay. And it was just an interesting process. It was just one conversation. And she was a nurse. And she said, "Well, what did you like doing at school?" And I sort of looked back and went, "Well, I really loved human biology." And she said, "Well, why wouldn't you look at nursing? You're obviously a very caring, heartfelt person." And yeah, it just a switch went on in my mind. Whereas, and she also told me about what nursing was and was what it wasn't, because I had imagined bedpans and all the really sort of crappy end of the spectrum for nurses, but it was so far from that. My nursing journey took me to some amazing places and some incredible experiences, which for me, when I look back at what I've achieved in my career so far, that nursing as a base was everything, I believe. Yeah.
That's really interesting because I mean, you talked about how everyone in your family was in medical, so it seemed like the obvious route, but you didn't do it because of that. You actually did it because it was something you actually wanted to do, and it took someone else to light that in you to realize that, yeah, just because everyone else in the family has done it doesn't mean that you're doing it their way. You're doing it your way.
Yeah, and I'm very much that type of person, if you know me. And I think also on the flip side of that, I know what I didn't want to be. And as much as I'm so proud of my father and everything that he's achieved and everything that he's given to us, I've got two brothers and my mum, but he had an incredibly, he had long, long, long work days. He's a surgeon. He was on this board, that board, this committee, and the time he gave to his profession was phenomenal, which I know a lot of people are doing that now outside of the medical profession, but I just knew that's not what I wanted for myself. And if I was to have a family, I didn't want to be doing that. So I think at that stage, I knew that I wanted to be more, um, you know, life beating, with the beat of my own drum, really. So yeah, it wasn't going to be a career working for someone forever. So I wasn't a nurse for long.
How long were you a nurse for?
Oh, good question. Um, the first 6 months after graduating, I went to St John's in Subiaco and worked as a graduate there, which was terrific, working on a medical surgical ward. And then from there, I went to Paraburdoo. So when I was doing my nursing studies, I actually wanted to go to Hawaii or Saudi Arabia. There were these fantastic nursing journals that talked about going overseas to travel. I didn't end up doing that. I fell in love, and my partner then was a exploration geologist, and we moved to Paraburdoo, which I was so excited about, and I became the sister in charge at the Paraburdoo District Hospital after a very little experience, which was humongous. It was strangely, I didn't feel too overwhelmed. I was along for the journey, for the experience. I answered lots of questions. I always do. And so I spent 2 years there, just probably over a bit 2 years, yeah, a bit more than 2 years. And in that, I guess back then, district hospitals were able to operate. So we were doing surgery. I was involved with the anaesthetics. We were delivering babies. I was also the X-ray operator for the town. So I trained as not a full X-ray operator. We could only do limbs, so we couldn't do heads. We were doing chests and limbs. So, and yeah, hands and feet, of course. So if there was an accident in town, I was called in after hours to do the X-rays. So the experience was amazing. The emergency side of it was, yeah, quite distressing at times. But I worked, yeah, for 2 years as a nurse. And it was when I got back from Africa, I worked a little bit longer as a nurse. So I'd say all up, including my mining work as an OC health nurse, maybe 8 years. But I quickly knew when I was at Parablue that I wanted to move into a path outside of hospitals. I knew that I wanted to help people beyond fixing them up, and I love stitching and I love doing all that sort of stuff and dressings. But yeah, it was the preventative medicine that I wanted to go into. So I went and studied a grad dip in health and safety at Curtin University, and in the middle of that, I moved to Africa. So it put a little bit of a hold on things.
Wow, gosh, you've been all over. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Your journey could not be further from mine because I'm such a wuss. Like even going into a hospital makes my feet kind of curl up. I'm so weak stomached watching the hospital stuff on TV. And when you're like, oh, I like doing the stitches and the bandages and doing this. Like, oh no, I mean, I think it's incredible that people are able to do that. And I do wonder if it was a real emergency, how I would actually cope. Because if anyone's seen me cut my finger while I've been chopping veggies, you will know that that's a big drama in itself.
Yeah, and it's important to know that about yourself, and you might surprise yourself that you might actually be the one that jumps in feet first, and when everyone else is sort of sitting back going, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" And I worked as an underground emergency coordinator doing emergency rescue and all sorts of things when I was on the mines, and yeah, I learned to quickly respond. And it wasn't in my nursing that, I guess it was. I think that probably gave me a good basis for not being squeamish, but that just jumping in, knowing that you've got to accept the situation, stuff has happened. But some people can't do that. I've been to so many situations, road accidents that I've just come across as a member of the public, and people are, they're just frozen, don't know what to do until you start giving them orders. You do this, you do that. So yeah, but it's good to know it about yourself. You might have done a first aid course. You just, yeah, do what you can.
Yeah, I think it's super important that you have to have basic knowledge of that. I just know that it's not something I would jump into having to do. But in an emergency, I guess you just don't know what you're capable of in an emergency, to be honest, until it happens. But Amanda, so we've been traveling all around the world. What point did we get interested in sleep specifically?
In sleep, it was probably about 15 years ago. So I went to Africa, came back. I went into mining, worked in OC health because of that interest in the health and safety, preventing these accidents. So I finished my grad dip, and I very quickly started my own business, consulting business. So I worked on the mines for a number of years, OC health nurse, emergency services coordinator, safety manager, had some incredible opportunities again. And yeah, it was one of my clients asked me to put together a fatigue management course. And back then, fatigue management in mining, particularly, was a very big subject. So, of course, accidents, a lot of them are caused by, fatigue is a big underlying factor. And so I went and researched fatigue. And of course, with my nursing background, I love reading about, I love research papers. I understand the medical science of it. So I was reading about fatigue, and the science of sleep just really, really got me excited. And also, I started looking at the focus that, well, not just the mining companies, but also the Department of Mines back then were looking at, which was this fatigue and shift work. And of course, shift work is a big component of fatigue. How long you work, whether it's 8 hours or it's 12 hours, how much of a break you have in between, whether you're on a 3 week roster cycle or you're on an 8 and 6 roster cycle. And so these were all really interesting components to the whole, fatigue management around risk and accident prevention. However, I really thought that, and I still do believe that sleep and having great sleep practices and being a great sleeper is the most important thing that you can do for injury and accident prevention. So that's where I started. I've come a long way from there. And I've had, I've now got a global risk management business, which I have had since I did that consulting way back. And I've now got an e-learning development company, which I started about 10, 12 years ago. And that's building e-learning resources for government departments and private organisations. So we work with Perth airports, we work with the health department, Department of Finance, and that's using, full character animation. So that's another thing that I do. But sleep, I've wanted to do an online sleep course for a long time, build one, and just never got there because I've been put off with other people influencing my decisions around. You can't just put a course online and expect people to come. And so and that's probably definitely the case. And then last year I just went, it's now or never. Everyone's talking about sleep. Get in now and start doing what you've been researching for 15 years. And that's what I've done. I've essentially been collecting every piece of information and research. Well, not every research paper, of course, but yeah, the ones that interest me. So there's a lot to sleep, and I've got my areas which really excite me and which I think have real solid backing. And influencing people. So I'm not a sleep expert. I'm not a sleep scientist. I have a science degree, but I think my skill and where people really love to connect with me is where I can unpack all that science of sleep. I can distill it into some really easy, bite-sized, actionable daily practices.
It was after I first met you, Amanda, and you'd mentioned about Ariana Huffington and what she was working on that I went and listened to her on a podcast. And it was fantastic to see someone that high powered and that
Mm.
influential and someone who was working herself to the bone to experience burnout, and then to make it so available to us to kind of have that conversation. She was making it mainstream, basically. Is fantastic. Like, I think we need to have figures like that who are bringing it to the forefront so that people like you can work with people like me on an individual basis to actually work through that issue. Because one of the scariest things about sleep is if being tired is almost the same as being drunk. Yet you get behind the wheel of a car when you're tired because you just need to get home or whatever, and you don't think anything of it. But obviously, it's just the same as if you'd had a few beers or whatever. But that's obviously from the risk side of things. But even just from day to day, can you talk to us a little bit about just the impact that having good sleep can have on your day-to-day life, your mood, how productive you are, all that kind of stuff?
Sounds like you know it all.
Oh no, I don't
It's
even know any of it.
no, you do. And probably you've learned it from me in our conversations. But it's and just going back to your first point, Megan, it's it's so important that we have high profile people in globally, in our worlds and in our sphere, who can influence us, because for too long it's been that messaging around, you know I can sleep when I'm dead, essentially. And that message of, if you want to be successful, you need to put in all the hours you possibly can on your work, whatever it is that, is your personal endeavor or your business endeavor. You've got to put all those hours in. And it's sleep that can be compromised, when in actual fact, that is such not the messaging we need to be giving people. The science is clearly indicating that you will have a shorter life. And that's sort of the high level view of it all. If you want to look at the impact of sleep on our lives, it is that you will have a shorter life. So certainly sleep when you're dead.
Well, that must be why the McNeils last so long, because we sleep a lot.
Except your mother.
Yes, well, she's not a blood McNeil. She's horrendous. So yeah, we'll throw her under the bus as an example of someone in a minute. I think, Amanda.
She'll love us. So yeah, look, the impact of sleep is enormous. So where do I start? The whole concept of beauty sleep. Whilst that might be superficial, it's quite an important one, particularly for leaders and people who are at the front of a business and wanting to motivate people. And there is science around, not just, well, I mean, we know for ourselves, if someone's tired, they've got, they don't look their best self. They're not as appealing. And there are research studies, don't ask me to quote them, I can send you the links, but there are research studies that have shown people who have poor sleep, they are less attractive, obviously, less appealing, and we don't want to really hang around with them. So they are less sociable, and people don't want to socialize with them. So, in a leadership sense, in an organization, if you're tired and it's visible, people people will respond to that, and it'll be that they don't want to connect with you, they don't want to engage with you in eye contact. So yeah, there's that beauty sleep. There's also that rejuvenation. So whilst we sleep, it's when our immune system gets a kick, everything recover, well, not everything, but the cells have the opportunity to recover. So there's the beauty sleep, there's the immunity. If you're well slept, things like immunizations. So if we're all looking, particularly where you and I are in Australia at the moment, but globally, we're all looking at COVID-19 vaccinations, and we want them to be effective. So if you have a great night's sleep, that immunization is going to have a much bigger impact on your immunity. So again, research, everything I talk about is research based, and I'm talking about quality peer reviews, not not the quacky stuff. Yeah, so I could talk for you for hours about it, but I guess the one that I really like to talk about, and every conversation I have, I make sure it's in there, and it is the impact of light. So sunlight, particularly on our bodies, on our health, on our well-being, and we all know about the body clock, and we have a body clock that doesn't run in sync with our 24-hour day clock that we have all over the world. It runs a little bit longer, and of course, there's great variability there. However, that needs to be reset each day, and the biggest impact on that is the exposure we have to sunlight early in the morning. And there's science behind it, and melanopsin cells in the retina, but I won't bore you or your listeners with all of that. But just believe me, get outside, you get some early sunshine, take off your sunglasses, and yeah, and wake up your body, get that boost of cortisol and adrenaline, and yeah.
Well, that's what I'm going to do as soon as we get off this call, I think.
You should have done it about an hour ago.
Oh, I've missed it. I was
No,
too busy getting.
you haven't missed it completely, but the best impact is when the sun is low. It's got that low solar angle, so you've got the wavelengths of the is where the wavelengths that the sun at a low solar angle, your melanopsin cells in your retina are most sensitive to that. So they're going to give you that kick of cortisol and adrenaline, and you want that at the opposite end of the day to when the melatonin is released. So yeah.
That's really interesting. I'm going to take note of that. So first thing in the morning, get outside, go for your walk rather than
Yeah.
that's is more beneficial than your evening walk, really.
Absolutely,
All
absolutely.
right.
And no sunglasses. And of course, when I say get exposure to the sun, some people might think, look at the sun. Of course, we're not talking about looking at the sun. And even on a cloudy day, anyone that you listen to, it's about outside, even on a cloudy day. You need to be there longer. And if you're inside, I'm inside here at the moment, it's a cloudy day. But even if it was a sunny day, the sunlight coming through my window is not enough to kick that body clock. It will eventually if I sit here for long enough, but it would be 50, 100 times longer I'll have to do it for than if I just went outside, had a bit of a walk. I go and do yoga for 15 minutes in the morning. I go and sit in my hanging chair. I get intentional for the day. I get my son out of bed now. He loves that. He's 13 years old. I know, his favorite person. Out of bed, have your pee, but then outside into the sunshine or the cloudy day, whatever it is. And he might shoot a couple of hoops. He might just sit there and hang over the pool edge while he's just, waking up, but outside in the sunshine.
Yeah, incredible. Okay, thanks for sharing that, Amanda. Now, you were talking about sleep and how important it is for leaders. You need to get good night rest, etc. Is that different for everyone though? Because I know that there's lots of research around some of the was it Lincoln, some of the great presidents in the past that slept on 4 or 5 hours a night, and that was their norm. Is that just normal for some people? That is the same as you and I getting our 8 hours.
Normal? What's normal for me is normal. What's normal for you is normal. There's enormous variability amongst all of us across the globe around how much sleep we need. And you just need to work out what that is for you and
Yeah.
prioritize that amount. But in terms of people who, we talked earlier in the conversation around people who have promoted, we can get by on little sleep. Maggie
Mm.
Thatcher, there's a few that are, very, very high profile. And there is a link now around poor sleep or lack of sleep and brain degeneration and Alzheimer's. And there's a lot of studies going on, some brilliant studies. Matt Walker's doing some studies around that. In fact, I think his lab is focused on the impact of sleep and whether also it's a bit of a you know, chicken or egg is, Alzheimer's causes lack of sleep or brain degeneration. So
Mm.
that's an interesting space. But yeah, certainly Maggie Thatcher, she got by on very little sleep apparently, and she ended up with Alzheimer's.
Yeah, so maybe
And
there's a correlation there. Well,
yeah, well, it's the science is indicating there is. So
yeah,
sleep, I need, I'm not perfect. No one's perfect, and there's no perfect sleep. But we need to get a really solid period of sleep in one block in our day. I was speaking to a lady the other day who sleeps in two blocks. So she goes to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning for 3 hours, and then she has another big block in the middle of the day. Whilst that might be 6 hours, it's not the ideal. So yeah, it's just working out what is ideal for you. And I think this whole idea of I can get by on 7 or less than 7 hours sleep a night is BS. It's absolutely BS. And there are probably, I think the stats are 0.00%, point 0.9 um, or 9, but very, very little people in the world who have a rare, rare, rare genetic a gene which allows them to function extremely well with very little sleep. And when people say, "Oh, that's me, I can function really well on less than 7 hours sleep," believe me, I think I can too at times. And it's amazing what our brain can convince us of. So after one night of poor sleep, you're going to feel pretty, but after 3 or 4 nights, you start to get used to this new normal.
yeah.
And yeah, and that's okay. Well, I don't know any difference. But it's not until you get that really great sleep again that you realize, oh my God, how joyful do I feel? How much more energy, how much more focus, clarity. I'm performing much better.
So, with the lady you were talking about a moment ago who has the two blocks of sleep, that sounds quite similar actually to what my mum does. And obviously, if you were working with someone that's it's not overnight. You don't say just go to bed at 10 and don't wake up till 6. It's it's a bigger process than that. But how do you get started with someone like that to get them into those patterns and get them into those habits to be able to get a proper solid sleep?
Okay, let me just rewind a little bit. So when I say in one block, I mean a block of time where you're dedicating to sleep. So I'm not suggesting that you sleep for time in the evening and time during the day. That's sort of what I'm trying to allude to. It's
Yep.
more around just committing to a block. Whatever time you decide to go to bed at night, and that's your sleep window start to whatever time you want to wake up. It's that block. If you wake up in the middle of that block, that is okay. We have these micro awakenings during the night. Sometimes we're aware of them, most of the time we're not. And that's completely natural. And I also had probably what your mum is going through at the moment, which is this: I wake up in the middle of the night and I am awake for maybe an hour, even longer. I don't have that anymore. I've worked through it. And the way that I worked through it is reflecting on how we used to sleep. So there is some research and evidence that indicates that we used to sleep in two blocks during the night time. So we would have this midnight awakening. So we would go to sleep when the sun went down, which makes sense because we didn't have the benefit of Edison or Tesla on the light. So, now we're able to stay up as long as we want or not even go to bed. But they would go to sleep when the sun went down or when the candle that they had available died out. And they would sleep throughout the night, but they would wake after 6 hours or so and they would get up. They might go and do something. They might go for a walk, visit a neighbor, and then they would go back to sleep and have this second part of their nighttime. And I can't begin to tell you how much that impacted my sleep. I used to wake up in the middle of the night. When I had 25 staff, I'd lie awake, worrying, worrying, worrying. And then I'd be awake going, oh my God, goodness sake, get to sleep. You're not going to function tomorrow. And then I would start to not be worrying about the things that started me, being, hyperactive in my mind. It was about worrying, not getting back to sleep. And this is a real issue for people. So as soon as I read that science, I would lie in bed at night and think, this is so normal. My ancestors used to do this. And the pressure that took off me was enormous. And I went to sleep. And I'm not saying it works that easily, but I just think people need to be aware there's not this perfect go to bed, wake up after, whatever you want to be doing, 8.5 hours. Yeah.
Oh, incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, So, Amanda, we've talked a bit about, where you started, how you got into nursing, how you got into sleep, where that was ignited, where the passion kind of came from there. And you've talked a bit about the online program that you're developing at the moment. Is that live yet, the online sleep program? Not yet, but that's
No,
coming soon.
yeah.
And what other ways are there that people can work with you?
One-on-one coaching. At the moment, I'm offering the one-on-one coaching, which I've offered for quite some time now. And I am starting to record a podcast, which everyone seems to be doing. But listen to mine, it's going to be awesome. Looking
It'll
forward.
put you to sleep.
No, now that's a really good point. I had thought of Sleep Made Easy, but I think people might tune in thinking they're going to listen to Matthew McConaughey, perhaps reading them a lullaby or, singing them something. No, mine will be about unpacking the science of sleep, and it'll be little micro uh, recordings. So 10 minutes max solo shows, and I've got some guest shows which will appear once a month, and I've already recorded those. So, yeah, that's exciting. So you can listen out or look out for that. Following me on Instagram is really the best thing. That's where I'm most active, and that's where I'm putting out most of my tidbits and my hints and tricks. I don't like the use of the word hack, but yeah, tips and tricks to get into a better sleep pattern. And the course will be coming. I'm hoping it'll be March or April, but I'm still deciding. I mean, that space is growing so it's such a heavy, everyone's doing an online course, and I'm just looking at different ways that I can perhaps take my message to the world. And I'm looking at perhaps an app, like a habit app of some sort. So I'm still exploring that.
Perfect. I love it. Thank you so much for your time today, Amanda. And I will put all of your contact details in the show notes for anyone who's listening.
Thanks so much, Megan. You have a
Bye.
lovely day.